I would like to begin by talking about what we're going to talk about this evening. Lift 1. It was at the time when it opened the world's fastest, longest, and highest. And that was just the first section, Lift 1. Lift 2 completed your journey up to the top of the mountain. It was a remarkable feat that was built in a year. Now, the idea started long before that, when Friedel Pfeiffer had the opportunity to come to this area on training exercises with the 10th Mountain Division, and what he saw was great opportunity. And when he returned in 1945, he began to push forward his agenda and his idea of putting a lift up Aspen Mountain. His Friedel Pfeiffer Ski School was formed in 1946, and he began to meet the right people to put the players together. Walter Pepke met Friedel Pfeiffer, and they met with the Bridge and Tramway Construction Department of the American Steel and Wire Company in March of 1946. So in order to put this lift up the mountain, they had to secure the leases that were on the face of the mountain, still owned by some of the mining families that were here in the area. The last and final piece was secured in December of 1945, and the plans began. By April, the chairlift path was charted out and the clearing of trees began, with a surveyor by the name of Frank Willoughby leading that up. By May, the Aspen Skiing Corporation filed its charter for becoming an incorporated business here in town. That was May 16, 1946. The cost of this lift was going to be approximately $150,000. And the construction began on June 24th. They had to build the foundations for then the towers, then the wires, then the cables and the motors that were involved. By September, 3 months later, they were on schedule to have created the longest, 8,400 foot long, fastest, 550 feet per minute, and could carry the greatest capacity in the world at that time. 275 people could ride up in an hour. It covered the greatest vertical rise, 2,200 feet. This was, again, just the first section. The total ascent was 3,225 feet above the town of Aspen. The first section of the lift was actually a mono cable, so that meant it had 1 inch and an eighth steel cable that ran 16,000 feet long and weighed over 16 tons, and that would both carry and pull the chairs. Lift 2, the second section, actually was a bi-cable lift, and it was having 1 cable to carry the chairs and then the other cable to pull them up. The price, because I know you all want to know, how much did it cost to ride that lift when it opened? Well, if you lived here and were a permanent Aspen resident, and you were in school or below, a single ride was only 25 cents. Now, your daily ticket at that age was 75 cents. The adults for a single ride had to pay the 75 cents, and for a day, you could ride for $1.50. Now, if you were a guest to our town at that time, the single ride was $2, the daily was $3.75, and you could get a 3-day pass for $10 or a weekly pass for $20. 1946-47. In November of 1946, Herbert Beyer completed the sun deck up at the top of the mountain, and on December 14th of 1946, the chair began to take people up the mountain. The opening ceremony, however, didn't take place until January of 1947. It was a 3-day celebration, much like our winter school. It was actually on the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th of January in 1947. And it brought dignitaries such as the senator one of the senators of Colorado, the governor-elect Naus was here for that opening ceremony on Saturday morning. There was even a special Rio Grande train that traveled up from Denver to Aspen. It left Denver Friday morning at 9:30 and it arrived in Aspen at 5:30 that evening. And that was the special train that brought you up here. There was a wonderful dinner held here in the Hotel Jerome, and on Saturday night there was a dance in Armory Hall. All part of the festivities that included not only ski races, as well as ski joring races, ski jump expeditions, a costume show, and many other things. But rather than me talking to you about the lift anymore. Let's look at what Aspen was like before the lift. So we're going to take a look at a short film called Aspen Before Lifts. It was filmed in 1946, and it features 4 skiers: Friedel Pfeiffer, Johnny Litchfield, his wife Jean Litchfield, and Percy Brightout, all of whom had taught school in Sun Valley and then came here to work with Friedel in the ski school as instructors. So, Philip, we're going to go to the first movie, and Casey, if you'll take the lights out, thank you.
Off that frown, get out of town when first the snow comes down. Skiing in the sun, winter is fun. Wax up your skis and bend the knees, run down the slope so white. Powder snow and you're all right. When night comes along, you'll find joy and song where good fellows gather around. A nice fireplace, a smile on your face, and grab your hot buttered rum. Wipe off that frown, get out of town, then skiing in the sun. Boy, oh boy, winter is fun. When night comes along, you'll find joy and song where good fellows gather around. A nice fireplace, a smile on your face, and grab your hot wipe off that frown, get out of town, then skiing in the sun. Boy, oh boy, winter is fun. Along we glide along, oh heart to the song of the skis. Come on with us, and as we shush, you'll wake into new ecstasies. We'll dance along, romance along, to songs of the gay whistling breeze. When winter is king, oh, to ski is the thing, for nature does nothing but please. Her mantle of snow around, then puts a sun in the blue. She fills the air with a joyful sound, and it's all for you. We slide along, we glide along, in tune with the wind's harmonies. Your cares will all go in the sun and the snow, so hark to the song of the skis. tune with the wind's harmonies. Your tears will all go in the sun and the snow, so hark to the steed melody.
you who have an empty seat next to you, would you raise your hands? We have a lot of people standing. So come on down, folks. Don't be afraid. There are chairs in just about every row. Find yourself a seat. I would like to, Lift 1 made it possible for not just the hardy, well-advanced sportsman, winter enthusiast to get to the top of the mountain. It was going to open it up to other people. And I would like to read for you a letter that was written in the Aspen Daily Times. It was printed on January 2nd, 1947. This is impressions on riding chairlift for first time. Dear Anne, what doing, you ask? No cooking, but will you be surprised at its results? Today I rode the chair toe. No, not today I am a man, but today I rode the toe. You know how squeamish I am over giddy heights, and if you recall the picture we sent you of Aspen Mountain, you can see it's no bunker hill. So you must realize what a feat it was for me to be suspended in midair on a journey of hundreds of feet up, 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 and without the usual exacerbated male voice admonishing me. Don't be so silly, there's nothing to be afraid of. It was a gala opening of the toe, the longest chairlift in the world, we're mighty proud to report. The mayor's daughter swinging the champagne in his honor himself, being the first to ride the toe officially up the hill. Then we lesser lights could take our turns. The postal department should have gotten our first day covers and special stamps for the occasion, don't you think? Well, anyway, we were there. Last summer, when the toe was under construction, I had opened my big mouth once when I felt brave and had declared I would ride the toe or bust. There I made a mistake, a grave error. My husband, being Scotch, with a measure of hard-bitten Yankee thrown in, had the Yankee not been gratis, it would have been handed right back, I know, insisted that I ride this day. It was free. Any other time, lassie, it'll cost you $2. So what could I do? I had said I would ride or else, but fortunately, neither the toe nor I had to go that far. I didn't have to commit hara-kiri, nor did the toe break down with my poundage. Although, when I was scooped into the chair and it swayed and buckled and someone in the crowd shrieked, I thought, this is it! I'll confess that I felt definitely like reneging when I had a close-up of whence the toe led, carrying the intrepid skiers. My heart began to ooze right out my toenails, carrying my meager courage with it. But when it came my turn, there was I, bundled up in a hodgepodge of all the warm clothing I could lay my hands and feet on, with no other recourse than to see if the chair and I could make the desired contact at the crucial moment gracefully, or I sit hard or fall backward into it as it rounded the turn and came to where the attendant had propelled me. Now, getting on the chair with grace and lightness, my girl, is something that requires finesse and practice. In my case, I doubt not it would be endless. The chair rounds the turn on its non-stop journey, reaches the point where you're standing. You sense its approach, slowly, steadily, menacingly, ready for its next victim who, hypnotized, is scooped up in one posture or another. The victim me grasp with one hand the horizontal frontal bar, designed only for moral support, I know, swung it into place across my tummy, thereby bringing the footrest into position also, clutched the suspending arm and with the other hand, grasped the hope and hoped this wasn't my time as the chair swung back and forth in its greedy effort to either spew me out or acquiesce to my weight. In the meanwhile, all this was going on. I was practically dizzy from trying to get myself adjusted mentally and physically to this nightmarish situation. We were ascending the mountains, over housetops, treetops, from tower to tower, but always up. You've heard of walking on air? Now I know what it feels like to ride on air. Occasionally a curious bird hovered not too near, an expression of worried wonder detected in the handling of its wings. His swoops, his dips and circles. He had nothing on me. I was worried too. We've read in advertisements about the lift from a Coke or a glass of 7-Up. Ascending the mountain via the chairlift is literally a lift in every sense of the word. We were carried up hundreds of feet in less than 30 minutes. And each minute, the vista grew and changed. It grew bigger and bigger. The vastness of the world that opened to view on all sides made me feel definitely awed, and at the same time highly exhilarated. As the chair mounted higher and higher, I began to feel like shouting, "Excelsior!" or "Horatius at the bridge!" But the other riders would have felt that I was wackier than I am. So I restrained my exuberance with a deeper breath than the thin ozone and another look around. I felt pretty small and inconsequential, surrounded by that glorious magnitude of wide, deep valleys, mountain range after mountain range, snow-tipped, highlighted with the lowering sun. That little foothill down below I finally recognized as Smuggler Mountain. When my heart was like to burst with the magnificence of the unfolding panorama, for the feeling inside was the biggest lift of all, I turned to the sights below. There to the right, my eye traced the pattern made by fresh ski trails in the powdered snow, dotted at intervals on each side with the dial marks of the accompanying ski poles. Farther away, skiers were sailing down the runs, dodging clumps of bushes, upthrust rocks, or disentangling themselves from a stand of young aspen, or gliding down the precariously slick roadway. Looking ahead, I caught a flash of movement and wondered if it might be some venturesome wild animal streaking for the safety of his lair. But as we aired nearer, I saw it was a narrow, dark stick moving jerkily back and forth. Then it disappeared completely. What on earth, I wondered. My curiosity was soon satisfied, for as my chair reached that spot, what or whom should I behold but a very prominent Aspen businessman in the act of setting that narrow stick, his ski, back on the terra firma, and setting himself up to what is considered in this stage of our so-called civilization a normal position for the genus Homo, a vertical rather than supine position. Brushing the snow from his clothes and settling his glasses back on his nose, he looked up at my exclamation and, among other tersely choice remarks, observed that it was pretty tarnation icy. Farther on, my eyes were greeted with a sight I subconsciously been waiting for. A lone skier, utterly engrossed in the abandon of his chosen sport. Never had I beheld anything like it, barring even the beautiful ice skating at the St. Regis in New York City. The grace, the perfect coordination, the rhythm were like a silent symphony as the figure lifted himself off the ground in absolute reverse turns and jumps, this way, then the other, winging to an abrupt stop, a perfect climax to one of the most thrilling performances I'd ever witnessed. It was art in perfection. On the down trip, after much the same difficulty getting me and a chair together simultaneously, I saw a ski take off down country by itself, doing some high-powered shushing on its own. Looking around for its mate and former rider, I noticed a slight haze to the left, and out of its blue emerged another figure, well known in Aspen circles, scooting along on one ski, searching diligently for the runway, which by this time had done a belly lop and nosedived into a drift. Looking back, it was apparent the skier had finally spotted the recalcitrant member and was descending on it as fast as circumstances would allow. So goes the life of a skier. Should I or should I not attempt to learn to stay upright on the long, slick sticks? With my curvaceous excess avoirdupois, should I fall, all emergency squads would be SOS'd. To extricate me from the cavern, my imitation of jet propulsion would have grooved in the snow. To be or not to be in the ski groove was the question, and while thus pondering, the foot of the mountain was reached, and it was up to me to unscoop myself from the chair without landing face down in the churned slush. With that problem emphatically but not gracefully solved, I plowed down the short decline to the car, my cheeks still tinging with the sharpness of the wind, thinking of the gorgeous beauty I'd seen, the closeness to God that I'd felt, the heartwarming sweetness of children held by parents so they could enjoy the ride too. A very small fry looking terribly alone in the chair but hanging grimly to the bottom. The shriek of a nervous bride calling her husband. The dangling of a state of suspension in space like a chemical precipitate while the tow stopped to let on or drop off an aged passenger. Why didn't they stop for me? The remarks of riders to each other in passing all ran through my mind like a kaleidoscope. I knew I'd ride the tow again, reminding myself of the cowboy who was on roller skates for the first time, who said, "Stay with them and ride them." I stayed with the chair. It was too far down to step off. I know too, I'm going to hie my poundage to a ski instructor at the first opportunity. Miss waving my skis at the sky, miss watching my skis shush down the mountain without me while I search my vocabulary for the right expression of my disgusted dismay. Would I say, "Land sakes," or "dear me"? My intuition tells me I'll find out. Miss being a part, however infinitesimal, of that wide grandeur and awesome majesty that has opened up to the skier on the mountain heights and slopes. Miss that touch with the infinite found only out of doors or in a child's eyes. Miss any of these experiences? Not I. But this I know too, that not in my wildest flights of daydreams will I ever be able to approach the beauty of movement of the lone skier I had glimpsed, but fleetingly, in his unbelievable coursing down that secluded stretch on the mountain. It was sheer poetry in motion. But I, Anne, rode the toe. When are you going to follow suit? Lovingly, the Aspen Bark S. Of Lift One, the way that it opened up our town to a new resource, that it brought us innovation, technology, and influence is without doubt. We're going to take a short clip and just show you Lift One as it operated in 1949 from a film made by Dick Durrance called Until We Meet in Aspen.
For the more advanced classes, the bigger hills are reached on the world-famous chairlift, just a few minutes' walk from the center of Aspen. Since it was first installed in 1946, thousands of persons have experienced the thrill of riding the big lift. Warm and snug in a snow-proof robe, this young lady can sun and tan on the way up. The riders going up look over at the skiers heading in for another trip. And here's a lift rider's view over the houses at the fringe of town, looking down at the chimney tops and roofs, a stork's eye view. Up over the lower reaches of Rocheron, across the old mining works. You need not be a skier to enjoy the thrill of a chairlift ride, or you can make the return trip down in equal comfort and security. Fabulous Bell Mountain there. For wide open ski running, it's unrivaled. The complete half-hour trip takes you from the village at an altitude of 7,900 feet to the crest of Aspen Mountain, a full 3,300 vertical feet higher, truly an island in the skies. Top of the first section, here you may rest in the warming house, tighten your ski bindings and push off down mountain. Or slide on over to the second section a few feet away and ride clear onto the top. So it's on to the summit of the mountain, 11,300 feet above sea level. During mining days, cable conveyors brought silver down from these hills. Now our modern chairlift transports hundreds of skiers and sightseers every day, summer and winter, to hitherto unopened terrain. Come to the top with us. Off to the left, the magnificent slopes of the upper Ajax Basin. And below, mile upon mile of downhill ski trails converging at the village. And here at the topmost terminal is a skier arriving, anxious to begin one of those exciting runs down, rested and refreshed after her ride up. While this lady came up just to see the view. The attendant helps her out, and she joins a friend to walk on up to the sun deck. Provisions have been made here on a mountaintop for those who want to rest, admire the views, or take a cup of coffee and a bite before touring down. A circular building of unique design, the sun deck is the creation of Herbert Bayer. It's a house of windows, of sunshine, of comradeship, and of good times. From the outside veranda, taking our coffee and our sunbath too, we look out at a sea of mighty mountains, the rooftops of the nation.
By a show of hands, could you raise your hand if you rode on Lift 1, Lift 2?
Oh my God.
Now, keep your hands up if you were here in 1946-47. Yeah. 1, 2. We obviously want to hear everyone's stories, so we do have a way of capturing your emails. We would love to hear from each and one of you, but we have 5 very brave volunteers who are going to come up and share with us a bit this evening. So if I could ask the panelists to come up to the stage, that would be delightful. And we're going to get to hear a first person, not me telling you what it was like, but them telling you what it was like, because they were the ones who were here, or their family was here, some sort of connection. So welcome. And then after we hear from them, we'll get a chance to also do some question and answer with the panelists this evening. So I'm going to start on my left. This is Greg Poschman. Greg's grandfather was actually one of the engineers who helped to design down in Denver. He worked on couplings, I know that much, I remember that. And then helped to design the mechanisms that were used in Lift 1, and his father also was here, okay. So helped to build and clear the trails, right?
Yes, am I on?
You're on.
So it's my grandfather, by chance, was hired as an engineer to help design the original tramway towers and the mechanism for the cables. And he worked for the Denver Mining and Smelting Company. I never knew this until just recent years. My mom, who's 92, hands out these little tidbits of information every so often. And so that was a recent one, that he had actually helped design that lift. And serendipitously, my father, coincidentally, my father spent his first summer and fall in Aspen actually assembling the lift. He worked as a laborer, and he put the wheels on the towers. And he talks about, I think the last day they worked on assembling the lift, the first early season storm came in with big flakes, and he said it was the most miserable thing, being up on top of a tower trying to get this thing done in time, but they did it. And a little bit more on that. My parents were contemplating getting married. They met in Alta, Utah. My father was a 10th Mountain Trooper and had come back and was working in Alta. And my mom was at the University of Colorado, took a semester off to go skiing. And they met, and my grandmother gave them her blessing to marry. She'd been to the Goethe Bicentennial and gave them her blessing to marry, but only if they moved to Aspen, because it was the only ski resort with a future. Time she was right. And so that's how they ended up here. So Dad worked on it in the summer of '46. He proposed to her on what remained of the old boat tow in the summer, which was parked at the base of 1A and still was until recently. And then they moved here permanently in 1950. So that's as much as I have. And then they worked for the likes of the Browns and the Durrances, and helping building it, the first ski schools, Friedel Pfeiffer's first ski school. And then I can brag that I worked for Dick Durrance on probably the last film he made, and helped him with his last films, and that was one of the greatest experiences at the beginning of my career as a filmmaker, to be able to work with your dad. So I think I'll shut up now and let them.
Next to Greg is Ruthie Brown. Ruthie is the daughter of Darcy Brown, who was the son of D.R.C., or David Robinson Crocker Brown, who actually came to Aspen in 1880.
Wow.
So we're talking a real close generational connection, although there were big gaps in those generations. But to the mining era and then to the ski industry. So Ruthie, tell us, as you weren't, we're going to be very clear, Ruthie was not born when the lift was built. But your family, without the land, the connection, the connection is you had to have the lease of the land. The lands were still owned by the mine owners.
Right.
And that's who her grandfather
Yeah.
came into play. So
Grandfather was the miner, owned all the property all the ski runs are presently built on, and handed the mining claims down to my father after he passed away. But I wasn't around when the lift was built. But I did have lots of stories. I heard lots of stories from my parents, and probably one of my favorites was my dad was always asked, "So what gave you the vision to build lifts and to create this incredible ski industry that you did?" And he goes, "Hell, we just got tired of walking up the hill." That was my dad. He was definitely a man of pragmatic. He worked hard, and there were a lot of other really old timers that some of you might remember, like Red Roland and the Fisters. And Red Roland was sort of a one-man show. He ran the ski company in so many different ways, working underneath my father, who was running the ski company. But I remember as a kid, I do, once I got old enough to ride the lifts, I was too young to get on by myself, so I had to be swept up into my older sister's lap. And you could see on there, it was quite a ride. It came in fast and you took off fast. So it was, and then we huddled under the canvas. Does anybody here remember the old canvas flip blankets that had all the felt and it had a little window? So my sister would, so it was at about a half an hour, so I spent a half an hour on her lap underneath the blanket, and she taught me Pig Latin, which was quite a dialect, and then we would sometimes pass over a tower, and there would be Red Roland working on the tower, in the middle of the day, and climbing up and down. He would literally ride a chair up, grab the lift as he was rolling by, and then work on what he needed to work on, and then climb down and grab a chair as it was heading by. So they were quite a cast of characters, and they knew how to get things done. My mom then was inspired because 1A was very successful, and the skiing industry was taking off. She wanted an easier way off the mountain, so she talked Red Roland and Dave's dad, who was then managing the company, to design her an easy way off the mountain. So they cut Ruthie's Run, and that's how Ruthie's Run was.
So we're going to pass down to Dave Durrance, whose father was one of the first presidents of the corporation, right?
He was the first general manager.
He was the first general manager, right. And who filmed the second film, did a lot of promotional films, and without he and Megs, your mother, who took a lot of photographs, they did a lot of the promotion that brought people and attention to Aspen. So tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I was 2 and my brother was 5 when we came here in 47. And we came here because they asked Dad to be the general manager and help get it going. And he had been a racer of some renown and had raced quite a bit in Europe. He thought this mountain could be an international resort. And so he used his connections with ski racing to get the International Ski Federation to hold the World Championships here in 1950. And so he was running the ski company, he was chief of race, running the races, and he was making a film about the whole event, all simultaneously. But he also felt that it was really important that the local people here, the waitresses and school teachers and carpenters, have a chance to enjoy this. And so he felt very strongly that an inexpensive season's pass was really important. And my mother helped get the Wednesday ski program going so that on Wednesday afternoons all the kids could go skiing and they could have lessons if they needed them. If they didn't have equipment, they could get equipment. Some kids didn't do it, but almost all the kids would go on Wednesday afternoon, and for many of them that was the only way they could get started skiing. And so thought that was really.
What years did that program run?
So the question is, what year did that program begin, you know?
I think in the about 53, 54, somewhere in there.
Did it last a while?
Did it last a while?
Still going.
So the Aspen Valley, or what was originally the Roaring Fork Valley Ski Club, was actually founded back in 1936. It's now the Aspen Valley Ski and Snowboard Club, so it's one of the longest, operating organizations here in the valley, for sure, continuously. Cherie, did you have Wednesday afternoons off to go skiing?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Cherie Oates. Maiden name is Durrance, a name you might be familiar with in this valley. And Cherie's family dates back again to the 1880s. More of the ranching side of the mining era. They were simultaneous because somebody had to grow the hay to feed the horses that were used in the mining operation. So it all took place concurrently. But Cherie's family stayed and let us hear your story in connection to Lichmont.
Well, one thing, my dad was the first commuter on Highway 82. We had a little house in town, and Dad had three brothers. The Jerome brothers ran the ranch at what is now the Watson Divide, or my uncle named it Jerbo's Dale. But anyway, so my dad would drive back and forth every day to go to the ranch to work, or to set the water on the, for irrigating. And so anyway, he had an old 47 Jeep from the war, and he'd putt back and forth, and now when I see the commuters, oh my goodness. But anyway, that's sort of the history. But we did live in town, and that provided so we could start skiing right away. And I think probably was one of the first ones to ride. The people were very excited about having this. It had always been a possibility with Ted Ryan and all these different people thinking, and Fred Friedel and so forth. But to really get that going, they had to wait till after the war, because a lot of the young guys were gone. And so, anyway, then, like one of my uncles, at one point after Litchfield, who was mentioned in the movie, owned the Red Onion. He bought it, no, vice versa. He owned, I don't even know who he got it from, but he had it and then later sold it to Litchfield, and someone said, well, how was that owning the Red Onion? He said it was the longest 6 months of my life. and I didn't miss selling it one bit. So a lot of people, who were not, they pitched in and they helped. Ed worked up on the lifts, helped build with the Dolinsik brothers, with Red, and different ones. And they just had a little simpler. They weren't the business people, which could be proven by what he said. He said, I couldn't stand it for more than 6 months. So anyway, but then what came up? My mom was she was a seamstress. And Dad worked on the ranch, of course, and they had sheep. They ran sheep in the fall, shipped the sheep, and then in the winter they'd take turns feeding the hay they'd put up in the summertime. But one thing that came with the lift and everything was you needed some things to wear. You needed we weren't from Europe or anything where. So anyway, a lot of the stuff that was used was from the 10th Mountain. The Army surplus, the goggles and stuff. But I'll let Tom talk now, and then I'll tell you more about the fashions.
Show us your
I brought this, and this, if you can imagine, was the lining of a 10th Mountain's uniform of the parka. And it's an all synthetic thing, but it's very, very warm. And I bought this one day, and I think it was one of the consignment shops and they had no idea that what its value was, at least to me. To show you, and then about that time, we
Away she goes.
Oh, wow.
The ladies got the idea to put braid on it, to make it look more feminine. And so this braid.
So they put the braid on to make it more feminine. Your microphone's underneath, so it's very well.
Well, you got it. Anyway, when I came, everyone said, "Oh, we love your new fur." And I said, "This is probably from 1945."
Oh, wow.
And look, it's just held up, and I got it, as I said, in a consignment shop, and they didn't realize what it was. So I snagged it right away.
Our fifth panelist up here is Tom Moore. So Tom's parents came to Aspen in 1936. His father was actually brought here to be the barber at the Hotel Jerome, actually. And I'm going to let... What?
He had his barber shop.
He had his barber shop right up. And you have the chair, am I right? His chair? You have his...
Oh, yeah, I still have his chair.
So tell us your story, Tom.
After listening to all the people that were involved in putting this whole damn thing together, to make a ski lift that would haul people up and down the mountain, I was the one that used it. We used it a lot, but back in those days, I remember when none of us were really old enough that we're getting down close to really know exactly all the fine tuning that went on in the years, because I was like only 6 or so years old at that time. But I do remember probably every one of us in the school system of that particular year. We were all up there watching the grand opening of that particular of the Lift 1 celebration, and of course we were already skiing over on Little Mill, and there were strict instructions from our parents that we couldn't go up that damn lift. And so it took a couple more years. We're trying to push this thing into a 2-year period, but I've been involved in skiing my whole life, and most of it on Aspen Mountain. So I know every bump on the, especially the number 2 lift that would span all the way across Turtlewood Park, and it had right in the middle, because it had shivs on the top, and then it had a drive cable underneath it. And so when we'd go across there, it would always, right in the very middle, when it was like 400 feet down, it would go like this, over a splice of the cable. And we'd always say, holy, when is this thing gonna break? So we'd get up to the top, and of course, at the top of Aspen Mountain in those days, there was pretty much nowhere to go, because the Spark Gulch wasn't cleaned out at that point in time, and we pretty much have to ski, over back over to what's the name of the trail? Buckhorn, yeah. We go over there and ski back down and go back to Lift 1, because you couldn't really go down. We saw that beautiful picture of Bell Mountain. Had no trees on it in those days. because it had all been mined off, or taken off for mines. And so you couldn't actually even go over there to ski. So we would just go up to the sun deck and have a sandwich or something, and then you'd have to find your way back over to the top of lift one and ski at the bottom. And in those days, that's all there was up there. Not too long after that, of course, the whole thing went to where it is today. When we saw this film here a few minutes ago, everybody's walking up through Hayden to go skiing, and they were walking up all the back of Aspen Mountain, or on skins and whatever. And now it turns out, after all these years, it's going around again. Everybody's walking up again.
That's all I have to say.
So we would like to open this up to question and answer. So I'm going to hand the microphone to Mike. Get that? Mike, it's the mic. And you've got a credit right here, has a question.
I've heard that it was a 45-minute ride, up lift one. Is that accurate?
40, so it's a 40, I think it was about 30 to 45 minutes. That's lift 1 and 2 to get to the top of the mountain, am I right?
Yeah.
So about 30 to 45 minutes.
And then also, did the lift stop? Did it break down? Was there ever an evacuation of the lift?
Not while I was on.
We just jumped out.
So, actually in 1954, the lift did break. A bull wheel or some piece of it broke, and the repair was going to take well over a week. They had to get parts from Denver, and the folks in town realized that if the tourists or guests couldn't ski, they would leave and everybody would lose money. So in an effort to keep people here, they created what was then referred to as the Jeep lift. So Natalie Genoux, who at that time owned the Little Percent Taxi Company, got together everybody in town who had a Jeep, which was everybody in town, and people donated their Jeeps and drove in a convoy basically up the backside of Aspen Mountain. They had an old bread truck or milk truck, something like that, or a laundry truck that drove people from the base of the mountain around the backside, standing up with their ski equipment in the back of the truck. And then they would get into the Jeeps and they were shuttled up and then shuttled down. And so this Jeep lift operated by volunteers here in the community, for almost, I think it was like 5 to 7 days. And this was in 1954 until the replacement parts were received and they were able to fix the lift. So that's one big example of when the lift broke, but that I know of. Anybody else?
There's a reason they got Romans going up and down the lift tower. Constantly.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, there was constant maintenance. So. We got a question back here. I'm going to get Mike. We want the microphone, so right back.
Okay.
Hi, Cherie. Hi,
Go ahead and just talk right into it. Put it right up.
I have a couple of additions or...
You got to keep the microphone right by your mouth.
Right here? Okay. A couple of things. Our sister Ginny, my sister Ginny is here. Our uncle manufactured those canvas covers, Schaefer 10 in Denver. You guys probably know that. And it was 25 minutes on one and 20 minutes on two. And when lift lines started building up in the 50s, early to mid 50s, standing in line at one and having a hamburger at Howard Hourie's, you also managed to make all your dating plans for that night. And then you get on the chair and put the canvas cover over your head, or you'd put the coat that you used to keep warm. You remember all that? And then you'd put it on when you got the top of two, and they had to send it down two, and then send it down one, The problem was you might beat your coat down. So then what did you do? Anyway, hi Ruthie, hi Davey, hi Cherie.
This is our Winter Skull King running around, yes.
Cherie and Tommy, you were both major ski racers. Do you want to tell a little bit about that?
We were both what?
You were both major ski racers here in town.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
We were teammates. Tom is a year younger than myself. Oh, I did you. But I'm sorry.
That's good.
I've got the coat, this thing, and it's easier to leave it on than it is.
How come it's the
You can
fur?
see why this was war.
Okay, so what do you want to tell about that?
About us being in high school together. And
Yeah, but we're supposed to be in 48, and this is a little longer.
yeah, it was. That was into the 50s.
Yeah, we skied a lot.
We did.
We went everywhere. Ski racing all over the dang countryside. And, God, we had fun.
That's true. And we had a coach. There were several over the years, but Gail Spence was the coach who coached us most of the time. And his son, Gary Spence, is now coaching my granddaughter. Oh my God. If you could imagine that whole a time. But Gail and his partner, John Oakes, started Aspen Sports in the early days. And that was he'd always be giving us skis at a deal. Because, they were wooden and they would break. They were, from one year to the next, if they dried out or anything, you could be going along and both tips would break, right? I even, one person, Jerry Jolly, who was a big guy, and he would ski along, and then if he broke it, he would cut it off to compare it to the next one. So he'd have one ski sawed off here, and the tips, and then he'd just go on skiing.
Okay, can I finish?
Go ahead,
We
Tom.
were, when Cherie's talking about Gail Spence, who was like a second father to me, and he coached us since we were 6 years old until I was out of high school. And our first ski race, he took us up to, I don't know if you went that time, up to Saratoga, Wyoming. Nobody even knew there was a ski area up there. And we went up there, and Joey Rolt and I, all we did was ride the banisters down in the hotel, because everybody was, that's what you did. We got in trouble, we were bouncing on the beds, and we skied a couple, 3 runs of slalom or giant slalom or something up there, and that was like the first time, and we were like 6 or 7 years old. And that was our first racing experience going out of town. And God, we had a good time up there. We didn't know where it was. And I still don't.
My question is to the lady who had the father that had the red onion. I was just curious what the culture, community of the red onion was back in that day, and why it was such a relief to be done with that, and what could you expect if you walked in there?
Well, I think the original book, I'm not sure. I think the drawers in the bars have some of the main bartenders written on the bottom.
That's here.
Oh,
That's J Bar, yeah.
Excuse me. Okay, no, I'm wrong about that. But anyway, I think the interior was pretty much the same. And you always had pretty much the same old timers come in and have a beer or two. and no entertainment or that I know of. But it was just a hangout place more for locals, which were very few at the time.
I just wanted to add that Beer Gulch, the famous Beer Gulch was in the Red Onion. And my parents talked about skiing to the Red Onion. You could ski all the way to it and leave your skis parked in front, and then they'd stagger home after the beers and leave the skis there and come back the next day and the skis would still be there. And that's what people did. So it was imagine being able to ski all the way to the Jerome or ski all the way to the Red Onion. That was just normal. Why would you stop at the
We saw that on the film,
right?
When they were skiing down Mill Street all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was not even a car track on it.
And at the time, the Red Onion was the only building on that block.
Right.
So you could just see like brick building, and you just skied along to them. I don't believe it was the Red Onion until Johnny Litchfield named it that in 1946, 1947.
Mike, there's a question.
There was a small restaurant across the street from the Red Onion called the Miner's Den. And the Herds owned that place, and David and Tasker were their children, and we hung out together a lot. But that's the only other building on that side of the street.
Where
Until
was the other
Guido's
one?
came along.
Right here, everybody.
What was it called before the Red Onion?
Keller Sandwich Shop for a while, but I'm not sure where it changed hands in between that.
I know from personal experience how much your growing up in Aspen had an influence in your life. But I also know from personal experience that probably the person that was the most affected by that was Dave. Can you tell me what you experienced as a child had to do with how you sort of orchestrated the rest of your life?
Insider knowledge there, I think. So.
Well, I think pretty much we all have had this town brand us with its character. But it was a small town, it was a small community. And so you learned early on that you were always accountable for what you did. If you took a piece of penny candy from old Mr. Tiedemann, your parents knew about it before you got home. He wasn't a very friendly fellow. And so when you had to go back in there and pay 10 cents for that penny candy, you learned very quickly that you were accountable for what you did. The ski racing for all of us was a real big part of our lives. I was teammates with these guys and with my brother and others. And Gail Spence was an enormous influence on all of our lives, and not just in the winter, all year long. He really was a great influence. As Cherie said, he had Aspen Sports, and so if you were on the ski team, you either worked at Sabatini's or you worked at Aspen Sports. And you never paid for what you needed, and you never got a paycheck. Both Gail had been a racer, and Sandy Sabatini had been a racer, and they just understood that was part of their role and our role in the community through all of that. And then I think, the fact that the music and the cultural aspects, we were all involved in that. Every time I go to a concert, I see Cherie's brother, Jimmy, there, and I often see Cherie there. And so the great diversity, I think that the accountability and then the diversity of experience and the sense of support that this community gives to its children is was really special in our time, and I think it still is.
Yes, yes, and yes. So you go first.
I just wanted to say one thing about the chair number one experience. And I wrote it as a little kid, and I remember being a little bit terrified and thinking that closing gate with the canvas, the orange, yellow canvas, was just the coolest thing in the world. That when I asked my mom, I called my mom this morning. She lives in Elgeville. She's 92. She's doing great. She was an early skier here in the day. She talked about the experience she enjoyed the most about riding number one was that it gave her this incredible, never-before-seen view of nature. And I said, what was it like riding chair one? She said, I saw porcupines, I saw ermine, I saw foxes, I saw deer, I saw this wildlife. She had 30 minutes in the first ride, all by herself in solitude. And if you can close your eyes and imagine for a minute, the only sound you would hear is the hum of the cable, and then the squeaking of the wheels as the chairs went through. It had that unique chairlift sound, and I realized after she told me that today, I haven't heard that sound since I was a little kid, because the chairlifts just don't make it anymore. But you know that the sound of that cable going across that wheel made this squeaking, talking sound that was wonderful. So anyway, I wanted to bring that back for everybody to remember.
Thank you.
One other thing to say about the coming of the lift here in Aspen. This town, when my mom and dad came, there were only, I think, 730 people living here, and most of them were miners and they worked in the fields in the summers, and they really didn't have anything going for them. It was a red onion afternoon every day. When the lift came along, it put all these ex-miners and all the other folks that didn't have work, it put them on the mountain to manage the chairlifts, to do the mountain management. Of course, there weren't any snowcats or anything like that in those days, but to pack the trails, to maintaining the communication systems, which, by the way, were all they were all World War II field radios that they strung the wires all along the towers up at the top, and if you'd have a snowstorm or stuff, something heavy or rain, heavy snow, it would break those wires, and of course then you couldn't open the lifts until you have communication to the top and bottom. And this put so many people to work and gave them an opportunity to stay in this valley that otherwise they would have been history. And so that's the best thing that ever happened because of lift number one and lift number two.
And we have one final question. Thank you,
I just want to add to this. My name is Mike McPhee. My father, Robbie McPhee, ran the second shift at the Midnight Mine after World War II. And he said one of the biggest mistakes they made were the miners had to take a half track to get up to the mine. And they were picked up at the Red Onion. And dropped off at the Red Onion. He said, we never got what we needed. The other story I wanted to tell was when everybody, Dick's father and everybody got the idea going for the lift, Dad was the only guy in town who could use a surveying transit. Because he would map out the tunnels in the midnight and then come back out and draw a line up on the surface for air holes. So he and Frank Willoughby took their transit over to Red Mountain. And I don't understand exactly the communication that you were talking about with the radios or semaphores, But the two of them drew a straight line up Ajax. And they had a number of their guys stationed, and they would wave to them or some type of communication to get that line straight, and then drive a stake into the ground. That's where the lift would go.
Wow.
One last story was, once they got the line drawn, they had to get all the equipment up the mountain, and they decided they would go to Grand Junction and buy a half-track, surplus half-track, and they cobbled together $1,500 and went to Grand Junction. And that night, or the next morning sometime, Dad called my mother and said, well, we're still in Grand Junction, we're looking. We haven't had any luck yet, but we had a great time last night in the bars. And she knew, she said, you went over there with $1,500, how much do you have now? Well, we had $1,400. The next night it was $1,300. But they finally got it half-track and got the stuff up.
I just want to make one comment before I get the mic back to Nina, but those of us who came later in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, we've always sort of just accepted the fact that this town was a success and an international phenomenon and known everywhere. But the people who built this place, there was no guarantee the skiing was going to be successful. And they worked hard, and they pinched pennies, and they scrounged, and they did a lot of it with their hands. So without what their dads did, and what they did, and some of the people out here, we wouldn't have had this place, and the prominence, and the jobs, and the income, and the lifestyle that we've had. So that's the part that we need to remember, is what it took to make this place the way that it is.
I could stand here all night and hear more stories, because I know there are not only the illustrious panel that we have put together, but there's people in this audience with whom we know we have Friedel's granddaughter, we've got Art Pfister's daughter, I know I've got more Durrance's out here, and those are just the people that I know of. And the great part is we want to know more. We want to know what we don't know. So please share your stories with us. Lisa is standing in the back waving her hand. She is our other vice president of the Aspen Historical Society. She's our curator. She's collecting addresses. We want to hear what you know, because that's how we learn, that's how we share. And it is an interconnectedness. The families from the mining era that are connected with the ranching families, that are connected with the today families, that are connected to the people who ran the Red Onion forever. Wobbs, how are you? We have, everybody here is somehow connected, and to be honest, that's the piece that makes Aspen special, is that we're here and we support each other. And so I want to thank one more time Greg Poschman, Ruthie Brown, Dave Durrance, Cherie Oates, Tom Moore, and all of you for being here this evening.